Eliot, Clough, and Sean Bock here for Hawkeye Insider and Swarmcast on this Wednesday. Golly,
Thursday.
Thursday. Jeez, Thursday edition of Swarmcast following Iowa signing day for football and learn a little bit more about Iowa's plans in the transfer portal. But we're going to talk about all of it today. Sean and I both cover recruiting there at Hawkeye Insider, so tons to talk about with this class. Sean, you mentioned doing an overview or like a big picture look. I mean, I guess what were you thinking when talking about because we're going to talk about some of the guys that we want to highlight, right? Like some of the guys that could play early, maybe some of our favorite underrated guys. What are you thinking as far as the class as a whole? I mean, it was one of the highest ranked or highest rated that Iowa's had in a long time.
Yeah, and I mean, it's not. I say this every time I talk on a podcast about signing day in high school recruiting. It obviously doesn't have the luster that it used to with bringing in some of these guys because now the transfer portal you can fill some of these spots immediately. But I mean, you look at this class, like kind of just the excitement of what it brings. I mean, in a program like Iowa too, where you want to be able to stack together classes. And it kind of feels like that's in a pretty good spot with this team. I mean, or with this program and kind of the way that they've been able to do things. And I look at some of these position groups too, and I just have so much like immediate kind of comparisons to some of the past groups or past classes that have had these position halls that are similar to this 2026 class. I think about the 2022 defensive back class with Xavier Wampa, Cohen Entringer, TJ Hall, Deshaun Lee. I see a lot of that in this class. Maybe not, that 5-star firepower that they have with Wampa, but Darian Jones, like that's a really big pickup. That's a really big commitment. Like that's a guy who I think could potentially see the field early, as we'll talk about later on. This offensive line class, I think it's more of a development class, but I see a lot of 2023 in it. I know you talked about Gene Reardon kind of being a Trevor Lauk type. There's a Hudson Parliament being more like a Leighton Jones, Cade Pieper type, where he could probably, make an early impact like Pieper did at one of the interior positions, or potentially be Iowa's next center behind Michael Nislinski, who is probably the assumed center going to next year. So there's a lot of parallels or a lot of comparisons, I think, with this class and some of the, other past position halls that they've had. And, there's positions that we talk about a lot, but there's also some where we're kind of like, wow, like that's actually a really intriguing haul. Like wide receiver, for example. Linebacker had two high 4-star guys, two very like solid 4-star guys, both in-state guys. And we just don't talk about it as much because there's a lot of young talent in the linebacker room. Defensive line's a solid haul as well. Like this is a class that I look at, I'm kind of just like, man, like where are some of the misses? Like, I just don't know if I'll see, like there's going to be misses for sure. Like that happens every class, but there's some like that I'm just like, okay, it's just hard for me to see some of these guys where I'm like, okay, this might be a reach, or this might be one where, I don't know about that one. But it'll be interesting to see how it all pans out, because now you kind of see how Iowa is able to stack some of these classes together, and you see that talent uptick, and you would think that Iowa would kind of be taking a back seat a little bit, or maybe dropping a little bit with the transfer portal and how like programs are probably negative recruiting against Kirk Ferentz as well. But no, they've been really, hitting that ground running, and it leaves people with a lot of excitement going into these next couple of years, because when you talk about the potential for the college football playoff to expand, that's going to be where Iowa, like that's their sweet spot. Like that's like great for pro. Like it's not great. I don't know if you want to say it's great for college football. Like I think it is really cool for college football, but it's great for programs like Iowa to have that expanded field. And you see how close they were this year with a pretty talented team. But remember, I mean, yes, Mark Gronowski was a huge part of that, but most of the roster was guys that they developed through the high school ranks, or guys that they brought in from the high school ranks. And when you continue to stack classes like they do, and maybe you get one or two missing pieces from the transfer portal in the next couple of years, you're setting yourself up for a potential run.
It's funny you say you mentioned the transfer portal, and yeah, I mean, I think everybody's main focus is that when it comes to off-season additions, especially at a program like Iowa, because it is so developmentally focused. You're just very rarely going to get a freshman. I mean, that's why one freshman usually pops in each class and sees the field. I mean, Lucas Allgaier got some time, but not, really super relevant time on the field this year. Jacob Wallace is a guy that saw some time on the field this year. Jalen Watson, the class prior, John Nestor before that. I mean, Cooper DeJean did a little bit when he was a freshman and got on the field in the bowl game and stuff like that too. But, you know, I do think that the transfer portal era helps Iowa too, in that, you know, these big SEC, like Ole Miss and I mean, Auburn, these programs are so transfer portal centric now that it leaves some of these guys that are, you know, better prospects, though Iowa hasn't necessarily changed their recruiting philosophy by any means. But they're able to get some of these guys that maybe Auburn, you know, Ole Miss, these other SEC, maybe even Big Ten programs aren't going after because, oh, we just got a guy in the portal who's done it before, who's you know, maybe we consider to be closer to being ready. I mean, Trayden Bessinger, the way he was overlooked in this class until the very end, it was, I mean, look at those stats, right? I mean, one thing Tyler Barnes said yesterday is they had Cash Herrera previously committed, who's now committed to Boise State, was committed to Indiana. He flipped to Indiana, and now he's since decommitted to Indiana, and he's going with Boise State, which is just a crazy a route to take in your commitment as a college prospect. But to have a guy like Bessinger who put up just absolutely ridiculous stats as a senior, Barnes was like, and I think Lester was a little upset about how things went down with the previous commit. And he's like, I don't know what we're going to do. It's just not a great timeline. And then Bessinger shows up. It's like, oh, Tyler was right. Seems like Tyler's been doing this for a while. But Bessinger, just ridiculous stats, 300 some completions at like 76% completion percentage, over 4,000 yards, over 50 touchdowns, I think, to just like 4 interceptions. Crazy stats. So you look at a guy like that, and it's like, when's the last time Iowa got a quarterback like that? You know, I tweeted he's the highest ranked quarterback since Jake Christensen, and people were giving me hell.
Major bait.
Right. Well, it worked. So anyway, yeah, some really interesting fallout, I guess, with the current way of how the rankings and transfer portal and recruiting goes. But I mean, yeah, it's a very, very talented class. I mean, some of these guys that ended up 3 stars, we thought should have been 4 stars. Hudson Parliament, right on the fringe. I mean, and we look at guys like, I mean, I love Colin Witters. Luke Brewer would have been a 4-star if he stayed in 27. Like, it's just kind of up and down the line. I mean, I don't know that. I mean, Billy Wayvoda played in like a really high level in Georgia, so maybe he's being overlooked. It's just some things like that where it's like, man, this class is really good. But I suppose we should probably start with the top of the class and the big get, and it's a guy that you and I both love from the get go, and we were high on him before he got that ratings bump. In Darian Jones. I mean, I don't know about you, but I was feeling like, wow, I must be crazy or something, because this kid looks like a 4-star prospect. The speed, the vision, the playmaking in all 3 phases. Younger brother of our former cohort, our friend Dallas Jones, brother of Donovan Jones, who plays for Nebraska. Darian Jones is, you look at him, you look at the tape, you look at what he's done at the high school level, and you also look at what Iowa has done with defensive backs, with returners, and you're like, oh, this could be something special, because Jones is probably going to play. I mean, he's going to play on special teams. That's something he talked about with LeVar Woods. He's going to play DB. So there's some possibility of like 3 years and out type of thing is what you're looking at with Darian Jones.
Yeah, I mean, that's like kind of insane expectations to put on a kid. 3 years and out. No, I'm giving you a hard time. But I mean, in this day and age, especially, like, that's just like, that ultimately speaks to, you know, how, and there's some guys too that you just look at, like, obviously we're not the types of the Andrew Ivins, Alan True, and some of those guys with their experience, but there's some guys that you look at from an Iowa perspective that you're just like, okay, this guy, like, he just it just pops. Like, it just makes so much sense on film. And I think with this class, obviously there's a bias there with, or there's like a no duh with Jones being the number 1 ranked recruit in the class, but he is kind of that guy to me that just pops. There's a couple other guys in a few other classes. Lucas Van Ness was one of them for me, even though he was kind of underrated. John Nestor was one of them for me in 2023 class, and he ended up making an early impact. Reese Vanderzee 2024 was another one for me. I don't know if I really had one in 2025, but those were some of the three guys who had pretty, good success. Van Ness came a little bit later, but I think he went on the field earlier than I think most people expected, or at least made an impact when people are earlier than expected. And you look at the Iowa, because Jones is probably going to end up being a corner, right? I know he's got some flexibility to him, but I could see him potentially making an impact, at any of those 5 spots. And but corner, you think about the corner position for Iowa the last couple of years and where things are at right now. Obviously, you probably have to look into the transfer portal, maybe for 1 or 2 filler spots this year. But, that's a position that's had a lot of younger guys make their way up earlier in their career. And I think that's probably going to be the case with Jones, especially with him enrolling early, where he can, get into the weight room, get into what he needs to do, like learn the system, learn the scheme. And especially with how Iowa's depth chart kind of looks like right now at the corner position, Jones has a route to make an early impact, or at least be one of those guys that can really be in the conversation as that 4th or 5th guy, kind of like Jalen Watson did as a true freshman. But special teams too, like that's where we'll really get a good indicator of where he's kind of at if he ends up making an impact on special teams, which he likely will. As whatever, gunner, just kind of one of those guys, like one of those spots, like if he can fit in there, like that'll be really telling of where he's kind of at with his development and whatnot. But he looks the part too. Like he's got good length to him, he's got good size. He's a really functional athlete, moves extremely well, tremendous ball skills. And I think you look at a guy who can make plays after the catch and also make plays like in the return game, and you think to yourself, okay, like this guy's kind of got a little different gear than some of the other guys, or he's got more experience in some ways, because you look at some of these guys who play both ways in high school, and that's like kind of the ultimate, teller to me in terms of what kind of impact or what kind of production they can have early in their career too, or, kind of the flexibility that they have.
And speaking of flexibility, playing early defensive backs, one that you and I were both on as well is Marcello Vitti from Detroit. This guy, see, you mentioned Jones playing potentially all 5 spots. To me, he's a corner. Like with it's a little bit different with Marcello, whereas then I could see him playing all 5 spots. To me, he screams cash, possibly strong safety, but I could see playing corner because of the speed. He's and I say cash too, strong safety type, because he is a hard hitter. He's a football player, played running back and safety at /nickel at is it Dearborn Christian or something like that? Where
Dearborn, or it's Divine Child.
Divine Child, yeah. He's from, I think Dearborn is like a suburb.
He's from Dearborn, Michigan, yeah.
Yeah, there you go. So to me, that's what, and when you look at those cash types, those are the types that are easy to I don't know, fall in love with, I guess, as a type that could play in a bunch of positions, could play on special teams. That's why you and I both liked Olante Dean in that 25 class. Now he's playing running back, but to me, that's where VT, his versatility, and I wrote about this in our 3 players that could play early, or prospects that could play early. You included it in our superlatives as well. It's the versatility that he brings to the table. To me, he legitimately could play any of the 5 defensive back spots. I think he stands out as a cash, so would probably have to wait his turn to Lutmer. But in a situation like that, he could also play safety while he waits his turn. So he's one that sticks out as well. And he was a guy that I liked from the get-go. He was, I think, the second commit in this class. Carson Nielsen was first. I think he was second. He had offers from Michigan. He was really liked Purdue at one point. Vanderbilt was involved, if I remember right. That might be wrong. But some legitimate Big Ten programs were after him. And this was a relationship with Phil Parker. It's one of those like, oh, these guys are going to click. You know what I mean? Like, just when I say Marcello is just a football player, Phil Parker loves football players. You know what I mean? And on top of that, there was a comparison. His high school coach said that Phil likened him to Geno Stone. So probably like hearing that.
Yeah, and I think Geno is probably looking up his height right now. Geno's probably, oh no, they're around the same height. I was thinking Geno Stone was like 5'9" or something like 5'10", but Marcelo is probably around like the six, like right below 6 foot, I would say, maybe 5'10", 5'11". So, but yeah, I mean that's not a bad comparison at all. And I think you look at the success. I mean that kind of speaks to the success that Iowa has had in Michigan in the last couple of classes at the or dating back to really Desmond King and even going before then. With some of the guys that they've been able to get, Kayvon Merriweather, Cohen Entringer, and a couple other guys too. And who else was
Deshaun Lee.
Deshaun Lee, and then I'm trying to think if there was anyone else. I mean, there are, but my brain's not totally clicking right now. But that I think that kind of speaks to the volume of having that pedigree and having that prestige in the state of Michigan. Because when Michigan State, I don't care, obviously it's kind of a dumpster fire right now, or at least when they were with Smith and when they were, because they continued to go really hard after VD throughout his senior season. And Michigan supposedly was keeping in pretty good contact too. I think Illinois and Wisconsin were also heavily involved at one point. I think Wisconsin felt pretty confident about where they stood with VD. But yeah, it kind of just speaks volumes to really this defensive backs class, because you look at Darian Jones, we talked about him already. VD is a guy that could potentially make an early impact. Ronnie Hill is one of those kind of under the radar, underrated kids with great length, great ball skills, kind of all those tools that you want in a cornerback, and just his fluidity as a mover too. He's going to have to be able to kind of clean up on his technique a little bit in terms of coverage and whatnot, but he'll get there. There's a great athletic profile there, and that's why I'm so high about this defensive back class too, because like I said, you just look at him, you see potential, and you see productivity right away potentially.
Hill's another one that Michigan State was trying to poach from Iowa as well. You look at some of the physical traits and the way he hits, it is a little bit reminiscent of Xavier Wampa. Just the way he pops guys and the ball's coming. So he's rangy, long. You really like that as a projected free safety. So yeah, I like Hill as well. Let's talk a little bit more about the offense, because loaded offensive line group between, like I mentioned, Nielsen, you mentioned Reardon, Hudson Parliament, Colin Witters, who is one of my favorite prospects in this class, Owen Linder. Now that Jones is up and a 4-star, and Julian Manson and Marcello are all 4-stars, I have to go, we have to go down to the 3-star to pick our guy that's going to pop, that might be overlooked. Excuse me. To me, it's Colin Witters. You and I have both seen him. To me, he's the big, strong, athletic, did play defense at one point in his high school career, and just plays with a mean streak. And that's like a dream scenario for George Barnett. Plus he's an Iowa City West kid. So to me, it's when you look at offensive line, you're not thinking, oh, they're going to play and be a starter right away, unless they're a 5-star. And that's not Witters. He's a 3-star. And I do see him as being a guy that's a staple on the offensive line for a couple years at the very least. Hudson Parliament is another guy that just plays mean. He's a South Dakota record holder in the squat and deadlift or something like that. So this offensive line group, and Nielsen's just huge, could have gone anywhere, decided to close his recruitment really early. Reardon's the versatile guy, and Linder is just a big tackle that, big long tackle that still has a lot of weight to fill out.
Yeah, no, that's why I kind of, the comparisons to that 2023 class is, I think it's pretty strong. And I mean, that 2023 class is in a pretty good spot right now with Lauk, being the best left tackle in college football this season, or one of the best on Pro Football Focus. K. Pieper having a pretty solid year. And, in his first year starting one of the guard spots, and then Leighton Jones. Those guys are probably the 3 leaders of the offensive line next year for Iowa. And, not too long ago, this was kind of that class where you're kind of okay, George Barnett's got his guys. He's got the guys that he wants in the system. And I know a number of 3 guys who were all Big Ten on the offensive line for Iowa this season were Tim Polasek guys, but it took time for them to really, mold into what they want and what they, need to do, and, kind of just get him into, Barnett's ideologies and his schemes and how he wants to run things. And obviously having Lester there at offense coordinator is a big help as well, and kind of the things that he's able to scheme up. But I think we need to touch on Bessinger a little bit more. Like, I think that's like, I think if we talk about offense, like, I think we really need to focus in on Bessinger because, man, it's kind of weird because Iowa's just been so portal heavy with quarterbacks. But, like, it takes 2 to 3 years, I think, for someone to really fully grasp what Tim Lester wants to do offensively.
Mm-hmm.
And I think with Bessinger, I don't want to say like early impact, but I think of him and I'm kind of like, man, there is a really good chance, very good chance, he is Iowa's next quarterback behind Jeremy Hecklinski. Not this year, I want to say, but I think he could be the next like full-time starter at like on the season opener. I have pretty good confidence with that.
I could absolutely see that too. Obviously, there's going to be a battle over this next month between Hecklinski and Brown, and we'll see how that transpires. We know Lester loves Hecklinski, little ball player now, as he likes to say, and we've seen a little bit of that. And Hecklinski has a chance to be really fun, so we'll see how that transpires. But I am not in disagreement with you. I like Jimmy Sullivan. Ryan Fitzgerald could be a fun story if he sticks. Like, we just don't know what that's going to look like with now his dad being the head coach at Michigan State. And obviously Stratton's gone. I would kind of be surprised if they don't end up dipping into the portal to grab like a walk-on like a Stratton just for the sake of depth, just because Lester likes that. And I mean, you're losing him and Gronowski. So yes, you're gaining Bessinger, but just, a guy who's been at the college level knows what it takes, right? So I would kind of be surprised if they don't grab just one of those guys. Anyway, the way, like, and I haven't watched a ton of Bessinger film, probably not the amount that I should have at this point, but I did watch the first few minutes of his huddle yesterday, and it's the whip on the ball, the motion, the fact that he's 6'5" definitely doesn't hurt. He's not a Gronowski. Very few quarterbacks are in terms of running the ball, but he's mobile enough to work the pocket. When I said he has the whip on the ball, it's like it comes out and it's a dart exactly where he wants it to go. He really throws dots, and it's a tight ball. And I'm right there. Honestly, I'm right there with you. I think he is next in line to Hecklinski at this point, as being a day one, not a day one starter, but a week one starter later on in his career. Because Hecklinski's going to be a redshirt sophomore next year. And obviously that means he has 3 years of eligibility. So we'll see how that pans out. But I mean, I don't disagree. I mean, he's the number 185 prospect in the country, number 12 quarterback in the country for a reason. I mean, they did run sort of an air raid offense there, so it'll be interesting to see how that marries with what Lester wants to do. There was a quote from, I think Blair Angelo got it for us that was like, "I'm coming to throw the ball." So, I mean, and I don't know what that's going to look like. Obviously, they prefer to be balanced just because that's Iowa and that's Kirk Ferentz, but. And of course, we know that the running back room tends to be pretty damn solid at Iowa. So you're going to use your running backs. But I mean, what do you think of my description of Bessinger throwing, whipping the ball, throwing dots and he's obviously an accurate passer, 76%. And it's not just like dump downs and screens and swing passes, stuff like that. They're throwing the ball.
Yeah. I think from a standpoint of, okay, he's not going to be Mark Gronowski in terms of how he can run, but he's got mobility and has the ability to extend plays too. And like I said, I mean, I talk so much about the system, but it's going to be interesting to see how, I mean, there's always an adjustment going to the next level if you're a quarterback, because you have to be able to not only adjust to like the speed of the game and, everything that's going on, because everything is so much faster. Your timing has to be better. You have to be able to, be able to execute offensively in terms of, okay, like I'm not going to be able to make some of the mistakes that I did in high school and get away with them. And I know that's obviously an obvious thing, but it's really true with him, because with the air raid, you can kind of, just kind of sling it around and let your receivers go make plays. And I think that's really key for him too, because that's something that we saw with Mark struggle this past year. Is it felt like at times he was so okay. My guys are going to be in this place at this spot at this time, and that ultimately wasn't the case. And when it wasn't that way, he was kind of like panicky with it. So I think if you have a guy who's confident like Bessinger, which I think is huge, there's a difference between being confident, being skilled versus being confident, not being skilled. Bessinger has kind of that, thing to him where he's skilled and he's confident.
There's Trayden Bessinger and there's Cade McNamara.
Right. Yeah. I mean, hey, Cade won a Big Ten championship, but
Wow. Got a lot of help.
helped that he had the Joe, which I mean, helped that he had a great offensive line, a run game, and a couple of pretty talented receivers. But I mean, I think if you're Bessinger, one of the things that I really like about this is he's going to be able to learn his way through the system. And I think Iowa got pretty fortunate too that, Ryder Lyons is going to BYU, one of the top quarterbacks in the country. I think he's the number 1 quarterback or number 2 quarterback in the country. He's going to BYU because then Bessinger could have really been the number 2 guy in this class had he wanted to stay home. But he wants to go to a place where, he can kind of change things up a little bit. He can kind of be that guy that really opens up the passing attack. And I think getting him to kind of speaks volumes to where things are potentially heading with Tim Lester, because you've seen the offensive improvement. You've seen that Iowa's been able to get the ball down the field a little bit more. And it's not just like a once in, a game or once every 2 or 3 games thing. Like they're actively looking to get the ball down the field north-south in terms of, hey, we're going to throw this 20-yard post or we're going to throw this 20-yard whatever. And there's different things or different kind of route trees that they have and different kind of schemes. Like if you have the talent and if you have the playmaking, if you have the quarterback, this offense could be really, really fun to play in, or really you could look pretty good in this offense. And I think that's one of the things that they really sold to Bessinger was, hey man, we haven't really had a quarterback that can sling the ball like you. Like we've had guys who are pretty pretty mobile and, can move around a bit, but we haven't been able to bring in a quarterback that, kind of sling it like you can and can kind of throw it around like you can. I'm not saying you're going to throw 30 passes, 35 passes a game, because that would just be so non-Iowa football. But we're going to put you in a position where you can really succeed in this system. And, you can really kind of change things up a little bit. And I know that's one thing that they've really sold to guys like on the offensive end before. But I think with Bessinger, I look at him and I'm just like, okay, this is going to be a guy that Iowa's finally going to be able to have, a potentially consistent passing quarterback for the first time, from the high school since Nate Stanley. Obviously Spencer Petras was from high school too, but he wasn't, kind of that guy. And it's not a Spencer Petras comp at all. I know people threw that around too because it's a 6'4" white kid from out west. But I think Bessinger really has that, mobility to him where you can use him to extend plays. You can use him in, different actions offensively, different kind of, passing sets and whatnot. But I think he's got, what Iowa needs in the next quarterback of the future. I'm not saying he's going to, compete for a starting spot, but it wouldn't surprise me if he's QB2 or QB3 by the time he's second year on campus.
Yeah.
Maybe it's a little aggressive, but I think there's a lot there. And I think they believe that he can take that leap too.
Yeah, Tyler did say that they're trying to push him to enroll early. He wants to play basketball, and that's something that Iowa usually doesn't do. But they've got 14 early enrollees, which is the most they've ever had. That's a ton. Obviously, we'll have more on that as that date approaches. But I think the thing is too, and this could be said of Gronowski, this could be said of the Iowa offense for the last several 5 to 10 years, is that these quarterbacks need help. And that's why I'm curious about what you think of this receiver class. It's really unique in that I think Stinson is a guy that could play early because of his physical size. DeAndre Smith is a guy that had offers from Indiana and Miami and ended up at Iowa. Brody Schaefer is a quarterback and DB in the high school level who heard some comparisons to Cooper DeJean from the staff as just a small town kid that was way more athletic than everybody else and had ball skills and could take off and make ridiculous plays. And then he was invited
I think he had 3 or 4 returns for touchdowns this year too. Like, I know the competition level is not great out there, but
Sure.
I think anytime you can, return touchdowns and, dominate. I think he had a pick six too, maybe.
I
Like
wouldn't surprise.
yeah, like it's like obviously the Cooper DeJean comparisons are unfair, but kind of from that same mold where it's like, dude, this guy just, he doesn't get off the field and he just dominates.
Yes, every snap. And he ended up going to that NFL Next Ones camp, and that's where Bud saw him, and that's where things started to progress. But had offers from like NDSU before that, and then Wisconsin came in with an offer for him at DB, and I mean, it's hard to get kids out of Wisconsin when they have Wisconsin offers, and Iowa got that. And I'm assuming that his recruitment would have continued to grow if he stayed open, but he stuck with Iowa, committed relatively early in the cycle. So he's a really interesting prospect to me for a variety of reasons because he has that athleticism, but he's also 6'1". He's not like a Reese Vanderzee 6'4", 6'5", like a Dayton Howard. Xavier Stinson, I've seen between 6'1" and 6'3". DeAndre Smith, kind of that speed guy, I think. But this also, what I wrote about in our 10 takes is that this class has the opportunity, at the very least, the opportunity to be ones that help change that trajectory of, at the very least, they can be guys that they might not be the 4 stars. They might not be the 5 stars, even high 3 stars necessarily. Well, Brody Schaefer's a high 3 star, but guys that, oh, this offense does something for receivers. You know what I mean? And like once the timing starts to get figured out, and maybe they prove us wrong. And Stinson is a guy that could prove us wrong. I mean, he's another one that had offer. He's committed to UCLA. Illinois and Wisconsin both wanted him after he decommitted from the Bruins. I think he had an offer from Indiana too. Vanderbilt was definitely involved in that one. Virginia, like he had offers from a bunch of different programs, and for a reason. So my point being, especially because they came in a class with Bessinger, they have the potential to be those guys that help change that narrative.
For sure. And I think that's going to be really important over the next couple of years, too, because it's amazing what happens when you kind of get a competent passing quarterback in there and a guy like an offensive system where you kind of know what you're doing in terms of like, hey, like our play schemes or what we want to do is like it's bound for success. We just have to have guys who can go in there and executing, guys who can, figure that out. And that's what's going to be really fascinating with Hecklinski over the next couple of years, because everything we've kind of heard behind the scenes is that Iowa feels more confident about him as a passer than they did Mark Gronowski, from what I've been told about guys. And I know you've heard the same about that, where, they just feel really confident about what he can bring as a passer. And I think that kind of opened my eyes when I heard that the first time, because, obviously Gronowski has the legs. I wouldn't say he throws an elite ball, but he's thrown a couple of like really nice passes throughout his career. But I think Hecklinski kind of just has that, I don't want to say Ricky Stanzi to him or anything like that, but I think he's kind of got that confidence to him where, he's going to want to, make some throws or make some tough plays or, be able to kind of throw receivers open. That was the one thing that I heard, was a big thing, is he's able to throw receivers open. And we honestly feel more confident about him as a passer than we do Mark Gronowski at this point, or that's kind of the vibe that I got from them. And, Gronowski was awesome. Like, he's what Iowa wants in a quarterback in terms of leadership and, team first guy and just kind of, was a gamer. And I think Hecklinski is going to be much of the same, but in, a different boat and just from a different skill set perspective. But yeah, this receiver class is really fascinating to me. Smith is a guy that like no one really knows anything about, which is kind of funny.
Did
but
not
he's
want to
pretty.
talk to us. He never got back to me to talk about committing to Iowa.
I mean, he's incredibly shifty, like really, solid with the ball in his hands. Schaefer, like we've talked about him before, but Stinson, like I think it was which A&F brother was the one that texted you where they were like, this guy is.
Yeah, I can't remember. It was one of the A&F guys, and they were like, I could cry.
And when those guys are saying that too, like that's a very, eye-opening comment for sure with Stinson. But it also begs the question too, like what is this Iowa wide receiver? I know we don't want to get too or focus on the recruiting class, but just really interesting to see what the Iowa wide receiver room looks like next year in terms of who is up there, who's not.
I mean, like you lose Weegan, Gill, and Phillips. And Phillips, I mentioned Phillips and Anderson. I mentioned Anderson and Phillips. I think Phillips was underutilized. Anderson was hurt all the time. So, I mean, take him out. But then you got Weegan, who had so much gravity in motion. Obviously, you have to account for his speed. Gill was your more sure-handed receiver that didn't look like it so much this year as it did the year prior. But you lose 4 dudes that's a lot. I mean, that's a lot of depth. I don't mean dudes like 5-star dudes, but you lose guys that's a lot of depth and a lot of similar skill set, undersized guys that have some speed. You bring back Reese Vanderzee and Dayton Howard, Jarriett Bowie, whatever happened this year. What's after that? I mean,
sorry, I was typing something, so I was on the different page, so I wasn't sure if you were asking me what. But
no, I mean, like off the top of my head, what am I missing? Who am I missing? What's in there?
I did the breakdown. I mean, I don't like Terrence Smith.
Yeah.
I don't know if any of the like walk-on guys are really going to pop right now. Isaiah Oliver's a pretty good coop as a walk-on as well. I think he's a pretty talented wideout. But yeah, I mean, that just makes it more interesting to see what they kind of look at in the transfer portal this offseason, because it kind of feels like you got to get maybe 1 or 2 more guys.
That you need speed.
Yep.
And like even I mean, obviously Isaiah Oliver is a smaller guy. Is Eli? I thought he told me he was going to be brought in as Eli Robbins. We're talking preferred walk-ons now. From Norwalk was going to be brought in as a defensive back, but he was listed as a receiver in the post yesterday. So I don't know what's going on there. He could play either one as a walk-on. Yeah. He could be either one. So we don't really know there. But I mean, you go down the list, and I'm trying to find receivers. I mean, let me adjust what I have going on here because I want to see. Okay, Jacob Gill, Anderson. Okay, this is what KJ Parker.
Yeah,
KJ Parker
is your guy. That's your guy.
That is my guy. That's my bad, KJ. I know he's listening. KJ and Terrence Smith is really it. I mean, Dylan Stecker is a guy that we heard a little bit about as a preferred walk-on. Heard some crazy things about what he was able to do at Spirit Lake, but he was just a freshman this year, and he's a big guy. He's 6'4". Does he fit that, fill that void? There's Apollo Payne from Prairie. Yeah, I mean, it's Jackson Nave, who was a Regina product. I went to Iowa Western, again, a walk-on. So they're going to have to be active in the portal. Like, you can bring in 3 freshman receivers. One of them could play, but then what do you got? You got KJ Parker, Dayton Howard, Reese Vanderzee, and Xavier Stinson. And KJ is the only small, playmaking type that you prefer, but he also has that skill set of an X receiver that he can go up and get the ball, really good ball skills. So they got to get something, and having a Sam Phillips type would be really nice. But at the same time, we talk about receivers and quarterbacks needing time in this system. You might need to go get a 4-star, preferably 4-star program or player from a Power 4 program that has that talent, that can be in the program for a while, get confident in what's going on, but has flashes and can do a little something this coming season too. So it's a lot of weirdness at that position at the moment. What's not weird is Luke Brewer. I really love that addition for Iowa too. He was right up there with the Jax DeJeans, the Cooper Terwilliger, that 27 tight end class. To get him to reclassify and end up at Iowa, you and I both covered his recruitment since he was a sophomore, freshman even, because he got that offer from Iowa State. But to me, it was like, oh, this is a national guy that'll end up at Georgia, Miami, Alabama, one of those. But for him to end up at Iowa, I really like him. I mean, he was a potential 5-star to me at one point. Really strong base, wide catch radius, athletic. I thought he would end up a 4-star, but it was like, okay, there's the potential there when he was a freshman. You know what I mean? Like, if he continues to grow into the body and show some wild physical traits. But I really like that addition too, especially in a class when you weren't going to bring in a tight end. And then this guy didn't fall into your lap because they had to work for it to get him, because, they were fighting Miami, they were fighting Tennessee, they were fighting Iowa State. But I like that addition too. And he's almost felt like he's gone under the radar And like if it was next year and he was a 4-star, he wouldn't have. But now it feels like that almost with him being a reclassified 26.
Yeah, and I mean this tight end room too for Iowa this year. Like I wouldn't say it was super talented in terms of like guys they've kind of had in the past, and obviously that's a high bar too. But you look at some of the younger guys that have been making waves. I mean DJ Vanami, like he's a younger guy. Thomas Meyer has gotten snaps. I know that's because of injuries, but like if you saw that picture with them after the Heroes game where he just looked absolutely jacked. Like I mean, he's gonna be a stud. I think he's gonna be a really good piece. And you add Brewer as well, and then we'll see what happens with Mason Woods and Eli Johnson. I'm not counting them all out at all. Meyer was just on the travel roster for the entire year, so that's pretty telling to us. Like even before Stringer got hurt too, like he was on the travel roster. So that's very telling. But I think this is kind of goes to show like kind of the uptick in what the tight end room, because I think the narrative this year is Lester doesn't use the tight ends. Lester doesn't want to use the tight ends as much. I just don't think they felt like they had as much capable guys in the passing game at the tight end position. That's why he wasn't using them as much, or he felt more confident with the receivers. But then once DJ Vanami kind of gets rolling, you see that he wants to use the tight ends. He wants to get those guys involved in the offense. And I think that kind of speaks volumes to, how you can use those guys as weapons in the next couple of years. And, I think that tight end room is in a much better spot, the next couple of years than maybe it was this year, with some of the talent that they have and some of the talent that they have coming up too. But we should probably dive into the linebackers and defensive line too. And
then yeah. Linebackers, I mean, Manson to me is NFL, like he has that potential. I mean, you just look at that frame. And when I was at the other place, I remember you and I talking about Manson a little bit, and you were just like, yeah, he's legit. He was getting interest from like Penn State. And I am honestly shocked that he didn't get more offers. Like if he wasn't tied to the Iowa program and his dad, Jason Manson, who's an offensive assistant, like I think those offers would have stacked up. But there were a few local, like regional programs, Minnesota, Kansas State, that tried to get involved. Kansas State was the close second to Iowa, and he'll be enrolling early too. The frame is nuts with Julian, and he can hit too, and he's got balls. Like he's not going to play a receiver, but he could play tight end. He could play edge. He could play defensive end. He could play 3-tech D tackle if he puts on a ton of weight. Could play any of the linebacker spots. Like the athleticism and the versatility is pretty crazy with Juju. Yeah, he's the one that I'm probably highest on. Kason Thomas, an elite linebacker and running back for Heelan. Billy Wayvoda is a guy that I don't know as much about, but is one that played in Georgia, and that's high level football. So I mean, when you're looking at linebackers, it's like, okay, they got 3 more studs. Like Seth Wallace is just a damn good recruiter, and he has Jay Higgins and Jack Campbell and so on and Nick Jackson to reference and be like, look, this is what we've done. This is what we churn out. So,
I mean, their ability to stack classes too has been really impressive, because you look at the 2024 class, those guys are probably all going to find their way on the field in due time, or potentially next year.
Yeah, I mean, the 25 class is really good too, between Burt Goucher and Carson Cooney. Like those those great pickups for any Big Ten program.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I mean, those guys were 4-star guys too, I think, coming out of high school as well. And then you take into effect what they have coming in. Like this feels like a very, very, very good linebacker class, and like the potential that they have. And it's flexibility too. I think with Voda, it wouldn't surprise me if he's kind of a Kyler, like more upside than Kyler Fisher, but I think he's kind of that, could be a staple on special teams and could really develop into a dang good linebacker. I mean, there's probably some bias with the in-state guys because they are in-state guys, but Kason Thomas was probably the best. I mean, the high school football team better than me, but Kason Thomas is probably one of the more dominant overall players, and probably best overall player in the high school ranks this season, just with the way that he was able to, make things happen on the ground in the run game, and then really get to the pass or get to the quarterback and also make plays in space at linebacker too. But you look at Manson, I mean, as a junior, he was just like, dude, this guy is multi-year starter in the Big Ten. Like, there is no doubt in my mind about that. And that's what makes this class really intriguing with some of the other classes that they've been able to stack up with them too, because it's like, how do you manage that? Not everyone's going to hit in these classes, but how do you manage that? Like, do they take the path that, some of these other guys did? Carson Shire, Jaden Harrell staying around for 4 or 5 years. I know it's way in the future, and these are the types of guys that that would probably stick around. But man, like, that's just so much talent and so much, potential in that room. Begs the question.
That is one of my takes. It was like, how do you get all these guys to stick around? Because it's just stud. I mean, there's a reason Michigan was trying to nab Cason Thomas and Wayvoda toward the end of this cycle recruitment. And I mean, I was lucky to get Thomas too, because he grew up a Nebraska fan up in Northwest Iowa. Nebraska wanted him. Arizona wanted him. So Kansas State wanted him. Kansas, I don't know if Kansas was involved actually. I think those two were involved. Anyway, all three of these guys could have ended up almost anywhere else in certain circumstances. So shout out Seth Wallace again. I know he was your recruiter of the year. Mine was George Barnett, getting 5 guys on the offensive line. Defensive line is not as much of a sexy group, I guess, when you look at these guys. Jezierski, I think, or Jezierski from Eden Prairie. They were state champs in Minneapolis.
Adina.
What did I say?
You said Eden Prairie. Okay. That's where Justice
Adina.
Sullivan was from.
Oh, okay. In Adina, really he's going to be a one-tech defensive tackle. I mean, that's just pretty clear to me. He's a big dude that fills gaps in the running game. Jack Janda, though, I think this is it was nice to get a late flip and all of that, but once people start to see, I mean, I didn't know much about him until I watched this film within the last few days, and dude is just a terror on the defensive interior. For his high school, was a tight end commit at Wisconsin, and then played a little bit of the interior this year. And it was like they just let him loose, and he just went after the quarter. Like, you don't have to. There's no scheme to follow. Just go, and he was a monster for them.
Who was that? Sorry, I wasn't paying attention. I was looking down at my phone.
Jack Janda.
Yep, I knew you were talking about the defensive lineman. Yeah, that's one that I really like in terms of, just Alan True mentioned it too, that him and Sawyer just kind of feel like guys that are, Iowa guys, like guys that are just going to come up, pay their dues and make their way on the field and find a way to make an impact. And once again, I know we have to talk about, we don't want to talk about the defensive line in terms of, you don't want to look too far into the future. You kind of want to evaluate these guys, but it just makes it fascinating to see how how they kind of allocate where they're at with guys that are, already in the program, because Janda and Sawyer are 2 inside guys. Then you have Yosei, who can play probably on the edge and interior, but do you put him more on the edge? Do you put him more in the interior? That's where Kelvin Bell can get kind of interesting with things. Devin Kennedy's an inside guy. You're really probably banking on Shima Shinike and Joseph Anderson these next couple of years too. I know we've really talked highly about those guys, but Anderson still feels like he's got to put on 20 pounds or something like that.
Yeah.
And Shinike looks like an all-world, one of the most physically impressive dudes in,
so long
and just so built. Yeah. But if you can get Kennedy and Devin Kennedy going on the inside, and then I know you talked about Brad Fitzgibbon as well being a guy that the Iowa program really likes, and then you add in Janda and Sawyer, who are more kind of developmental guys, and you can fit them in there. We've talked about how I think Iowa really made it a point of emphasis to get interior guys, because what was kind of their big concern coming into this year? The interior. And those are the most expensive guys in the transfer portal, up there with offensive tackle, outside of quarterback too. Mm-hmm. So the fact that they really made it a focus to get those interior guys, I think kind of speaks volumes to how much they want to be able to develop these guys and not have to rely on the transfer portal, because you're not going to get a Bryce Hawthorne every cycle or every transfer cycle, but you can kind of get in for a little bit cheaper and just bring him into the class and, he kind of thrives right away. The fact that you can develop these guys a little bit more, I think that's really encouraging. It was really a point of emphasis. And feels like to me too, they're really I mean, I know they're going to get Tyler Barnes talked about getting a couple of guys via the transfer portal as well in the defensive line. But it really kind of speaks volumes to me how they feel about potentially Shanike, Joseph Anderson, then maybe even Drew Campbell as well in the next couple of years. Like, I feel like they think that they can potentially take that step up into being, and then obviously Epinesa having that flexibility as well. But it's a really interesting group, because I think a lot of people, like I said, a lot of people want more guys on the edge, but interior are the guys that you really want, like inside, because I mean, like I said, those are the most expensive guys in the transfer portal.
Is Janda like a definitive defensive tackle to you? Because to me, he's either 3-tech or DN, just with his length.
Yeah, Alan True told me that he sees them all inside.
Huh.
But he probably has some flexibility too, because I think people are saying a lot the same about Yosei being all inside, but he could potentially move around a little bit.
Huh. Okay. Yeah, Yosei played only D-end in his limited snaps this year, so yeah, we'll see. Anyway, that's pretty much it for this class, isn't it? Did we miss anybody?
No, I mean, unless you got a walk on, I think Noah Daniel from Fort Dodge is gonna be a really good piece down the line too.
Noah Daniel's yours. David Faison's mine. From Cedar Rapids Prairie. I've seen David a few times. Just a very unique athlete, heavy hands. Led this is not led 5A. Led all classes in tackles for loss. 34 tackles for loss. Nearly half of his total tackles, which were 71.5. Nearly half of his total tackles were tackles for loss this season for Prairie. Talking to Coach Kyle Knock this last summer, he was like, he is the best athlete in the state of Iowa. Only got one off. He's short. I think he's like 6 foot.
He is short.
Yeah. That's if he was 2-3 inches, 4 inches taller, he'd have an offer from everybody. But he also played tight end, was very good at tight end, really maneuvers well, despite he's just kind of a unique tweener in size. And UNI was the only program, I think, that Division I program that offered him a scholarship, which was a bit of a shock to me. But he's the one that I'm watching. Why does Daniel stick out to you?
I just think it's one of those, like, just playmaker. And he's a small, like, he's kind of, I don't want to say DeJean mold, but I mean, remember, he was committed to South Dakota State as a scholarship guy. When you can flip those types of guys,
Daniel
when you can flip, yeah.
Okay, I was like, what? I thought you were talking about Cooper.
No. When you can flip those kind of guys, like, that's really encouraging to me. And I think too, like, I think obviously their offense was so focused on getting the ball to Drayshawn Ross that, if they were able to get it, if Drayshawn Ross wasn't on that team, then Noah Daniel would probably be their leading rusher. And, I think he's just a really, really good player all around.
All right. That'll probably do it for us today. Of course, we'll have more transfer portal coverage as the offseason goes along between now, bowl game, and then when the portal really hits. Men's and women's basketball going on right now. Sean and I will, at least I'll be at the Maryland game. Are you going to be at the Maryland game on Saturday?
I think David's taking my place potentially.
Okay. Well, I will definitely be there for the Iowa Maryland.
I will be working it though. I'll be working it for remotely.
Okay. And then things have gotten real with this schedule. So Iowa State around the corner, and tons more to follow with the men's basketball and women's basketball. Stay locked in with us at Hawkeye Insider. We have a lot more to come. So stay locked in. It's Eliot, Clough, Sean Bock, and we will see you next time.